The pregnancy test was still warm in my hand when I walked through the front door and heard my husband laugh in a way he hadn't laughed with me in years. I froze in the entryway, my heart pounding so hard it blurred the two pink lines in my vision, because that laugh wasn't meant for me. It was soft, low, familiar, and it was coming from the living room, where my sister was standing far too close to him. I hadn't even taken off my coat when I heard him say, "She can't know yet, not until after the appointment," and something inside me cracked so quietly I almost missed it. If this story speaks to your heart, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from, along with your local time, only if this story truly resonates with you, because I want to know I'm not the only one who lived through something like this. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 31 years old, and this was the night I found out my miracle wasn't just mine, it was the beginning of a betrayal that rewrote everything I thought I knew about my family. Let me take you back to where it all started. Long before that front door. Long before those words, back to 6 years of trying to become a mother. 6 years is a long time to measure your worth in months, and missed cycles, in negative tests lined up like quiet accusations on the bathroom counter, in early morning appointments that smelled like antiseptic and hope that never quite landed. Daniel used to hold my hand through every appointment, squeezing it just tight enough to remind me he was there, that we were in this together. I believed him. I believed the way he'd kiss my forehead after every failed round, the way he'd say, "Next time," like it was a promise instead of a prayer. We spent more money than I ever admitted out loud, thousands of dollars on treatments, medications, consultations, and every single dollar felt like buying another chance at a life I wasn't sure I deserved. My mother said I needed to relax. My mother-in-law said I needed to try harder. And my sister Sophie said nothing like that at all. Sophie would show up with takeout and sit on my couch, her legs tucked under her, telling me I was strong, that I'd be an amazing mom, that Daniel was lucky to have me. She said all the right things. She always did. Looking back, that might have been the first sign I missed. There's a difference between someone who supports you and someone who studies you, and Sophie always knew exactly what to say, exactly when to say it. There were moments, small, almost invisible ones, when I'd walk into a room and they'd stop talking just a second too late, or when Daniel would glance at his phone and smile in a way that didn't include me. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself 6 years of disappointment had made me paranoid, that grief can twist normal things if you let it. So I didn't let it. I stayed grateful. I stayed hopeful. I stayed blind. The morning I found out I was pregnant, I was alone in our bathroom at 6:17 a.m., staring at two pink lines that didn't fade no matter how many times I blinked. I sat on the cold tile floor for almost 10 minutes, just breathing, just holding that tiny piece of plastic like it might disappear if I moved too fast. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text him. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to give him this moment, after everything we'd been through, after every loss we never talked about properly. So I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, already imagining the way he'd look at me, the way he'd say my name, the way everything would finally feel worth it. I didn't know that by the time I stepped through that front door, he already knew something I didn't, and whatever it was bigger than the baby I thought would fix everything. I did not walk into that living room. I stood there, just out of sight, my hand still wrapped around the pregnancy test in my coat pocket, and I listened. That was the first decision that changed everything. Because if I had stepped in, if I had said his name, if I had let them see me standing there shaking, they would have rewritten the moment before I even understood it. Instead, I stayed still. I watched my own reflection in the hallway mirror, pale, frozen, someone I barely recognized, and I listened to the two people I trusted most speak like I was not even in the house. Sophie laughed again, softer this time, like she was trying to keep something contained. "You are overthinking it," she said, her voice light but controlled. "She is just happy right now. She will sign anything if you present it the right way." There was a pause, and I could hear the faint clink of a glass against the kitchen counter. Daniel exhaled slowly, like he was tired, like this was a burden he had been carrying for a long time. "It is not that simple," he said. "If she talks to someone first, if she gets outside advice, everything falls apart." My fingers tightened around the inside of my coat until the fabric creased under my grip. They were not talking about feelings. They were not talking about a mistake. They were talking about a plan, Sophie stepped closer to him. I could hear it in the shift of their voices, in the way the space between their words disappeared. "She will not," she said. "She trusts you. That is the whole point." That sentence landed harder than anything else. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I did trust him. I trusted him with 6 years of disappointment, with every doctor visit, with every tear I tried not to let him see. I trusted my sister with the parts of me I could not even explain out loud. And now I was standing in my own house, realizing that trust had been something they counted on, something they factored into whatever this was. I forced myself to breathe slowly, quietly, the way you do when you are trying not to be noticed. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might give me away, like they could hear it from across the room. Daniel spoke again, lower this time. "After the appointment, it will be easier. She will be emotional. She will want stability. That is when we do it." Appointment. The word echoed in my head, sharp and out of place. I had an appointment scheduled next week, my first official prenatal visit. I had told Daniel about it 2 days ago, sitting at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I could not drink anymore. He had smiled, reached across the table, squeezed my hand, told me he would take the morning off to come with me. I remember thinking that moment felt like the beginning of everything we had been waiting for. Now it felt like something else entirely. Something arranged, something timed. Sophie let out a small breath, almost impatient. "You are worrying too much. By then, everything will already be in place." I closed my eyes for a second, just 1 second, because I needed the world to stop spinning long enough for me to think. Everything will already be in place. That meant this was not new. That meant whatever they were planning had already started. Documents, conversations, decisions made without me, all moving forward, while I was counting weeks and symptoms and tiny changes in my body like they were miracles. I opened my eyes and stared at the front door, at the thin line of light beneath it, and realized something with a clarity that felt almost cold. If I walked in now, I would lose whatever advantage I had left. If they knew I heard this, they would adjust. They would lie better. They would hide it deeper. So I stepped back. Slowly, carefully, I reached for the door handle and eased it open just enough to let it click, then closed it again a little harder, just enough to make a sound. Footsteps shifted in the living room immediately. Voices changed. By the time I walked in a second later, they were standing apart, casual, normal, like nothing had ever happened. Daniel turned toward me with a smile that came too quickly. "Hey, you are home early," he said. Sophie was already moving toward the kitchen, grabbing her purse like she had somewhere else to be. "I was just leaving," she said, her tone bright, practiced. I looked at both of them, at the space between them, at the way they avoided each other's eyes for just a second too long, and I smiled back. It felt steady. It felt believable. "Yeah," I said, my voice even. "I wanted to surprise you, and for the first time in 6 years, I kept something to myself." I did not tell him that night. I did not tell anyone. I went through the motions the way I had learned to do over the past 6 years, smiling at the right moments, nodding when he spoke, letting him wrap his arms around me like nothing had changed, even though everything had. He kissed my forehead and asked about my day, and I answered with just enough detail to sound normal, just enough warmth to keep him from looking too closely. Sophie left within minutes, her hug quick, her eyes avoiding mine, her perfume lingering in the hallway long after the door closed. I stood there for a second after she was gone, staring at the space she had just occupied, and I realized something I had never allowed myself to think before. She was not nervous because she felt guilty. She was careful because she knew exactly what she was doing. That difference mattered more than anything. That night, I lay in bed next to Daniel, staring at the ceiling while he slept beside me, his breathing slow and even, like a man with nothing to hide. I turned slightly, watching the outline of his face in the dim light, and tried to match the man I married with the one I had heard in the living room. They did not line up anymore. One of them had been real. I just did not know which one. The next morning, I woke up before him. That alone was unusual. Daniel was always the early one, always up before his alarm, always moving through the kitchen like he had somewhere important to be. But that day, I moved first. I sat at the edge of the bed for a full minute, grounding myself, reminding myself that what I had heard was real, that I was not imagining it, that I needed to be careful. Then I stood up, quietly, and walked into the kitchen. The house felt different in the morning light, too still, too clean. like something had been rearranged while I was not looking. I made coffee out of habit, then poured it down the sink when I remembered I could not drink it anymore. Small things like that hit harder than they should have. Small reminders that my life was already changing, whether I understood it or not. Daniel came in a few minutes later, running a hand through his hair, smiling at me like nothing had shifted. "You are up early," he said, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. His voice was easy, familiar, practiced. I smiled back. "Could not sleep," I said. He nodded, like that made sense, like he had expected it. "Big week coming up," he added, pouring himself coffee. "We should probably go over some things before your appointment." There it was, casual, placed carefully into the conversation like it belonged there. I kept my expression neutral, even though every word from the night before echoed in my head. "What things?" I asked, reaching for a glass of water instead. He leaned against the counter, watching me. "Just planning stuff," he said. "Insurance, paperwork, making sure everything is set up the right way. You know, stability." Stability. The word sounded harmless. Responsible. Exactly the kind of word that would have reassured me a week ago. Now it felt like a script. "That sounds smart," I said, keeping my tone light. "We should definitely be prepared." He smiled, satisfied, like I had just confirmed something for him. "I already talked to someone," he continued. "A guy who helps set everything up. It is pretty straightforward. We just need to sign a few things." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of water to give myself a second. A few things. That was how he framed it. Small, simple, easy to agree to. "When were you thinking?" I asked. He glanced at his phone, then back at me. "Maybe after your appointment next week," he said. "You will feel better once everything is official. It will take a lot of stress off." My grip tightened slightly around the glass, just enough for me to feel it, not enough for him to notice. "After the appointment." Exactly like he said the night before. Exactly like they planned. I set the glass down carefully and met his eyes. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "That makes sense." He smiled again, softer this time, like he was relieved, like something had just gone according to plan. And in that moment, I understood something else. He was not waiting to see what I would do. He thought he already knew. He thought he had already accounted for every version of me. The hopeful version. The emotional version. The version that would sign whatever he put in front of her because she finally had something to lose. What he had not accounted for was this version. The one who had already heard everything. The one who was already paying attention. The one who was no longer reacting, but watching. And for the first time in 6 years, I was not thinking about what I might lose. I was thinking about what they were trying to take. I did not confront him, and that was the part that surprised me the most. I had always imagined that if something like this ever happened, I would react immediately, that I would demand answers, that I would not let anyone make me feel small in my own life. But that version of me belonged to a world where I was not carrying something fragile inside my body, where I did not have 6 years of loss sitting behind me like a warning. This version of me moved differently. This version paid attention. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I would have missed before, small details, patterns. The way Daniel kept his phone face down more often than usual, the way he stepped out onto the back porch to take calls he used to answer right in front of me, the way Sophie's name appeared in his recent messages more frequently than it ever should have. None of it was obvious on its own. Together, it formed something I could not ignore. On Tuesday morning, while Daniel was in the shower, I stood in the kitchen holding his phone for a full 5 seconds before unlocking it. My hands were steady, which felt strange. I expected them to shake. I expected guilt. Instead, I felt focused. The passcode was the same as always. That was the first mistake he made. Trust built on habit, not awareness. I opened his messages and scrolled just enough to confirm what I already knew. Sophie's name, multiple threads, short exchanges that meant nothing on the surface. Did you talk to her? Not yet. We need to move this forward. No heart emojis. No obvious signs. Just coordination. Just timing. It was cleaner than I expected. That made it worse. I locked the phone and set it back exactly where I found it. I did not need more. Not yet. That afternoon, I drove to a place Daniel did not know about. A small office building 20 minutes away, tucked between a dental clinic and a real estate agency. The kind of place you would never notice unless you were looking for it. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at the glass door, reading the name printed in simple black letters. Megan Holt, attorney at law. I had never met her before. I had found her online the night after I overheard them, scrolling through reviews at 2 in the morning while Daniel slept beside me. People described her the same way over and over again: precise, calm, unshakable. Those were the qualities I needed. Inside, the office was quiet, neutral. No dramatic decor, no attempt to impress. Just clean lines, soft lighting, and a receptionist who looked at me like I belonged there. When Megan walked in, she did not waste time with small talk. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and said, "Tell me exactly what you heard." So I did. I told her everything. The words in the living room, the timing around the appointment, the way Daniel had already arranged for someone to set things up. I kept my voice steady, just like I had practiced in my head. But there was a moment, halfway through, where it caught slightly. Megan did not interrupt. She did not react emotionally. She just listened. When I finished, she leaned back slightly and nodded once, like she had just confirmed something. "This is not random," she said. "This is structured." The word landed heavily. Structured, planned, intentional. She asked me a series of questions, each one sharper than the last. Did we have joint accounts? Whose name was on the house? Any existing trusts? Insurance policies? Beneficiaries? Power of attorney documents? I answered as clearly as I could, realizing with each response how much I had never questioned before. I had signed things over the years without reading every line. I had trusted Daniel to handle details because that was what partners did. That was what I believed. Megan took notes quickly, then looked up at me with a focus that made everything feel real in a way it had not before. "You need to assume that paperwork already exists," she said. "Drafts, at minimum, possibly prepared for signature." My stomach tightened, not from fear this time, but from clarity. That was exactly what I had heard. "What are they trying to do?" I asked. Megan did not hesitate. "Control," she said simply. "Control over assets, decision-making, and potentially medical or financial authority, especially if they are positioning this around your pregnancy." The room felt colder, even though nothing had changed. Control, not support, not protection. Control. I thought about the way Daniel had said the word stability that morning, how easily it had come to him, how natural it had sounded. It was not natural. It was rehearsed. Megan leaned forward slightly. "You do not confront them yet," she said. "You do not sign anything, and from this moment forward, you document everything." I nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside me, something that had been building since the night at the front door, finally settling into place. I was not guessing anymore. I was not reacting blindly. I was preparing. As I walked out of that office and back into the afternoon sunlight, I realized something I had not felt in a long time. I was no longer the person waiting for something to happen to me. I was the person deciding what would happen next. By the time the appointment week arrived, I had already stopped seeing my life the way I used to. Every conversation felt like a negotiation I was not supposed to know I was part of. Every smile Daniel gave me felt slightly delayed, like he was checking something in his head before responding. I mirrored him perfectly. I smiled back. I asked about his day. I let him talk about future plans as if I was still standing inside them with him. That was the hardest part, pretending that nothing had shifted while knowing everything had. The appointment was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. at a clinic 20 minutes from our house. Daniel insisted on driving. He said it like it was obvious, like it was his role, like this was a moment we had both been waiting for. I let him. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the road pass by in clean, quiet lines, counting the traffic lights like they could anchor me to something steady. He reached over at one point and placed his hand on mine, warm, familiar, practiced. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Just nervous," I said. That part was not a lie. Inside the clinic, everything smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. The waiting room was filled with soft music and carefully chosen neutral colors, designed to make people feel calm, safe, supported. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, watching other couples smile at each other, watching women hold ultrasound photos like they were holding proof that everything would be okay. Daniel checked us in, spoke to the receptionist, handled everything like he always did, control disguised as care. When they called my name, he stood up immediately, placing his hand lightly on my back as we walked down the hallway together. I let him. The doctor was kind, efficient, reassuring. She spoke about timelines, about early development, about what to expect in the coming weeks. I nodded at the right moments, asked a few questions. Let Daniel fill in the rest. He sounded attentive, engaged, exactly like the husband I thought I had. But I noticed something now that I would have missed before. He listened differently when the doctor mentioned paperwork, when she brought up insurance, coverage, recommended forms to update. His posture shifted slightly, his focus sharpened. It was subtle, almost invisible. But I saw it. After the appointment, as we walked back to the car, he seemed lighter, more relaxed, like something had just gone according to plan. "That went really well," he said, unlocking the car. "Everything looks perfect." "Perfect," the word hung there, too polished, too complete. I smiled. "Yeah," I said quietly, "it does." Instead of driving home, he turned in the opposite direction. "I scheduled a quick stop," he added casually, "just to take care of some of the paperwork we talked about. It will not take long." There it was. No hesitation, no uncertainty. This had been planned down to the minute. I glanced out the window as the familiar streets gave way to an area I did not recognize immediately. Then I saw the building. Clean, modern, glass front, with a discreet sign that read Financial and Estate Planning Services. My heartbeat did not spike this time. It slowed. Focused. This was the moment they had been working toward. Inside, a man in his 50s greeted us with a practiced smile, shaking Daniel's hand first, then mine. "Emma, it is so nice to finally meet you," he said, like we had been introduced long before this moment. Finally, the word settled heavily in my chest. We sat at a polished conference table, papers already laid out neatly in front of us, tabs marking specific sections, signature lines flagged in yellow, everything prepared, everything waiting. The man began explaining the documents in a smooth, confident tone. Joint asset management, beneficiary updates, contingency planning for medical decisions. It all sounded reasonable on the surface. Responsible, protective. Exactly the kind of language that would have reassured me before. Daniel watched me closely, not obviously, but enough that I could feel it. He was not watching to see if I understood. He was watching to see if I would comply. I placed my hand gently on my stomach, a small, instinctive gesture, and looked down at the papers without touching them. "Can I take these home and read them first?" I asked, my voice calm, almost soft. The room shifted slightly, just enough to notice. The man hesitated for half a second before recovering. "Of course," he said smoothly, but his eyes flicked briefly to Daniel. That was all I needed. Daniel forced a small smile. "It is pretty standard," he added, his tone light, almost dismissive. "We can go through it together now if you want. It will save time." Save time. That was the urgency. That was the pressure. I looked at him then, really looked at him, at the man who thought he had already calculated every outcome. And I smiled. "I would feel better reading it carefully," I said, "just to be sure." He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. "Yeah," he said, "of course." But the ease was gone. The certainty was gone. And for the first time since this started, I saw something real in his expression. Not guilt, not regret, just a flicker of uncertainty. Just enough to tell me one thing. The plan depended on me not asking questions. And now I was. 3 months later, my life looks nothing like it did the day I stood frozen in that hallway. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like it actually belongs to me. The house is quieter now, not empty, just honest. There are no hidden conversations behind walls, no smiles that need decoding, no plans being made about me without me. I moved out 2 weeks after that meeting, with Megan guiding every step, every document, every decision. The truth unraveled quickly once it was brought into the light. The paperwork they prepared never got signed. The accounts they tried to position never shifted. The control they thought they had never became real. Daniel did not fight the way I expected. He adjusted just like he always did, but this time I was not there to adapt with him. Sophie tried to explain, tried to reshape what I had heard into something softer, something forgivable. But clarity has a way of removing options. I did not need closure from them. I needed distance from who I used to be when I believed them. Now I wake up each morning with a different kind of weight. Not fear, not confusion, just responsibility for myself and for the life growing inside me. It is not perfect. Some days are still quiet, in a way that feels unfamiliar. But it is real, and that matters more than anything I thought I lost. I learned that love without respect is just dependency, dressed up as loyalty, and trust without boundaries is an invitation for someone else to decide your worth. If you are listening to this, and something in your life feels off, something you cannot explain but cannot ignore, I hope you listen to that voice. Not the loud one shaped by fear, but the quiet one that notices patterns, that asks questions, that refuses to shrink just to keep the peace. You are allowed to protect yourself, even when it disappoints the people who expected you not to. Thank you for being here, for listening, for staying through something that was not easy to tell. Wherever you are, whatever time it is for you right now, I hope you feel a little less alone knowing that someone else walked through it and came out clearer on the other side. If this story stayed with you, I would really like to know, what was the moment you realized something in your life was not what it seemed, and what did you do next? My name is Emma Carter, 31 years old, and the lesson I want to leave you with is this: never let someone else write your future in a language you were never meant to understand.